The world of the late Cretaceous was a stage of titans. Colossal beasts roamed forests of towering conifers and fern plains stretching to the horizon. But among them one creature stood apart, a paradox of nature, an herbivore armed like a fortress, built to face both predator and rival. Imagine it emerging from the haze of dawn. Each step presses deep into the soil, shaking loose clouds of dust that swirl in the air. Its silhouette takes shape. Massive body low to the ground, broad shoulders carrying the weight of survival, and above it all, a skull unlike any other. From that skull extend 3 deadly spears, horns gleaming as if sharpened by battle itself. Behind them, a frill of bone rises like a warrior's shield, framing its head in a crown of armor. This was Triceratops, the gladiator of its age. To those who shared its world, the sight must have been terrifying. For a predator, the message was clear. Here stood no easy meal. For rivals of its own kind, it was an invitation to duel. And for us, looking back millions of years later, it is an image burned into the imagination. A dinosaur that embodied both beauty and brutality. But the legend of Triceratops did not begin in triumph. In fact, when humans first encountered its remains, they misunderstood what they had found. Those famous horns, once brandished in combat beneath prehistoric skies, were mistaken for the relics of a long-lost mammal. For a moment in history, the greatest horned dinosaur was reduced to nothing more than a mythical bison. That mistake, however, would soon give way to revelation. With each discovery, the creature's true identity began to unfold, reshaping science's understanding of what dinosaurs could be. The Triceratops was not just another plant eater. It was a symbol of survival, a beast that walked the thin line between prey and predator, defender and aggressor. And in the background of its story looms an even darker shadow, the Tyrannosaurus rex, the apex predator of its time. Together, their rivalry would become one of the greatest duels in natural history. But before the battles could be told, the Triceratops had to first earn its name, its place, and its legend. The tale begins not in prehistory, but in the late 1800s, when fossil fever swept across the American West. Prospectors, ranchers, and scientists alike scoured the rugged landscape, searching for clues of forgotten giants buried beneath layers of stone. It was here, in Colorado, that a rancher stumbled upon something strange: fragments of bone, capped with great horns protruding from the earth. When the fossils reached the desk of Othniel Charles Marsh, one of the most prominent paleontologists of the age, the world was on the cusp of revelation. Marsh examined the horns carefully, tracing their curves, feeling their weight. To him, they looked familiar, too familiar. He believed they belonged to a mammal, a giant bison that had roamed North America in a distant age. With confidence, he gave it a name: Bison alticornis. The irony is staggering. The most iconic horned dinosaur in history, dismissed as a misplaced cow. But Marsh could not have known. At that moment, no horned dinosaurs were recognized by science. The idea that reptiles, let alone massive dinosaurs, carried horns like those of cattle was unthinkable. The fossil was filed away as another strange mammal of the past. But destiny was already at work. Just a year later, more discoveries began to surface. In 1888, a cowboy uncovered a massive skull jutting from a cliff face, a skull so large and bizarre that it defied explanation. Once again, the fossils found their way to Marsh. Slowly, piece by piece, the truth emerged. This was no bison. This was something entirely new. A dinosaur whose face carried horns like weapons, whose skull was part armor, part display. The misnamed bison alticornis was reborn. Marsh realized that the horns from Colorado belonged to the same creature as the massive skull before him. And so, in 1889, he christened it with a name that would echo through history: Triceratops, the three-horned face. This was more than just a new discovery. It opened the door to an entire lineage of dinosaurs, the Ceratopsians, a dynasty of armored herbivores crowned with horns and frills. The mistake of a bison had transformed into a revelation of a warrior. From that moment, Triceratops stepped out of the shadows of misidentification and into the spotlight of legend, where it would remain as one of the most celebrated dinosaurs of all time. Close your eyes and imagine a creature so immense that standing beside it would make you feel like an insect at the foot of a fortress wall. From snout to tail, the Triceratops stretched nearly 9 meters, a living tank weighing up to 12 tons. Its presence was not just large, it was overwhelming, a symbol of raw prehistoric power. What made this beast so extraordinary was not only its size, but how it carried that size. Its body was low and wide, built for stability. Its bones were not merely thick, they were reinforced like steel beams in a skyscraper. Paleontologists have compared its femur to that of an African elephant, already one of the sturdiest bones in the modern world. And yet the Triceratops bone is denser, stronger, capable of bearing stresses that would snap lesser creatures in two. This was an animal engineered by evolution to endure punishment. And then there was the skull. Imagine a head so large that it made up a full third of the animal's entire body length, 8 feet of solid bone sculpted into a weapon and a shield. At the back stretched a frill, wide and imposing, like a shield wall raised on the battlefield. Some scientists believe it may have been brightly colored, flashing hues to attract mates or intimidate rivals. Others see it as a bulwark of defense, covering the vulnerable neck against predators. Perhaps it was both, a display of beauty and terror combined. But nothing defined Triceratops more than its 3 horns. 2 immense lances rose above its eyes, curving forward, sometimes exceeding a full meter in length. They were capped with keratin, like the horns of today's rhinos, meaning that in life they were even longer and sharper than the fossils suggest. The 3rd horn, smaller but no less dangerous, jutted from its snout, ready to strike at any predator daring enough to come too close. Fossil evidence tells us these weapons were not ornaments. Skulls of Triceratops bear puncture wounds, fractures, and scars, signs of brutal battles waged horn to horn. Around 14% of skulls studied show trauma consistent with combat. These were not rare accidents, they were a way of life. When 2 Triceratops clashed, it was not a polite contest, but a test of dominance, a collision of titans with bone-shattering force. The Triceratops was not gentle, nor was it reckless. It was a creature of extremes, massive, resilient, and armed like few others in Earth's history. When it lowered its head and surged forward, the ground itself seemed to tremble, and whatever stood in its path faced the charge of a living juggernaut. The forest falls silent, the air grows heavy, a shadow emerges, and every creature nearby freezes in place. The hunter has arrived. 2 golden eyes glint from beneath ridges of bone, a mouth lined with teeth like knives. The Tyrannosaurus rex, the undisputed apex predator of its age. Only one creature in this world had the size, the armor, and the courage to stand against it: Triceratops. Their meetings were not everyday occurrences, but when they did happen, they were moments of sheer chaos, a struggle that would decide life or death for both. Picture the scene. The T-Rex lunges, jaws opening with a bite force strong enough to crush steel. Its teeth sink into the frill of the Triceratops, scraping and gouging. But this is no helpless prey. The Triceratops lowers its head, muscles straining, horns gleaming. With explosive power, it thrusts forward. The impact is like a battering ram. Dust erupts. The predator staggers back, teeth shattering against unyielding bone. Fossils confirm this violence. Triceratops skulls carry the signature of T-Rex teeth. Puncture marks, gouges, evidence of desperate survival. But just as striking are the bones of T-Rex themselves, scarred by counterattacks. One femur bears a deep puncture wound, perfectly shaped to match a Triceratops horn. Another fossil pair, dubbed the dueling dinosaurs, preserves what may have been the ultimate showdown. A young T-Rex and an adult Triceratops locked together in death, their final struggle frozen in stone for eternity. These were not predator-prey encounters, in the simple sense. They were duels of equals, power against power, weapon against weapon. For the Tyrannosaurus, the Triceratops was both prize and peril. For the Triceratops, the predator was both nightmare and nemesis. In these confrontations, there were no guarantees. Sometimes the king prevailed, feasting on the flesh of its armored foe. But other times, the 3-horned warrior proved it was no victim. It could maim, it could kill, it could send even the tyrant king limping into the shadows. The image endures because it is one of the greatest rivalries in natural history. 2 giants locked in eternal combat, their bones bearing witness to the fury of their battles. And for a fleeting moment in time, when horn met tooth, the earth itself must have trembled beneath their war. The battlefield image of Triceratops, horns clashing, predators circling, is only part of the truth. To truly understand this giant, we must imagine the quieter moments of its life, moments when the Earth was not shaking with combat but instead humming with the rhythm of survival. Dawn in the late Cretaceous. Mist drifts low across the forest floor. The sun rises behind towering conifers, spilling light onto palm groves and cycads. In the stillness, a massive shape moves through the undergrowth. The Triceratops, though armed like a warrior, is not on the hunt. It is searching for food. Its beak, sharp as a shearing blade, snaps down on tough vegetation, stripping leaves and stems in one swift motion. Behind it, rows of teeth, hundreds upon hundreds, arranged in intricate dental batteries, grind the plant matter into pulp. Over its lifetime, a single Triceratops might have grown and shed thousands of teeth, each perfectly designed to crush fibrous plants into digestible form. Ferns, palms, low shrubs. These were its diet. And when taller plants blocked the sun, a creature of 12 tons could topple them with a shove, claiming the foliage as its own. But if its feeding was communal, its life was not. Unlike some of its ceratopsian cousins, which gathered in massive herds, Triceratops seems to have preferred solitude. Fossil sites reveal single skeletons, isolated giants, more often than groups. This paints a picture of an animal that roamed alone, a titan that did not need the strength of numbers to survive. The armor of its body and the weapons of its skull were defense enough. That is not to say it never formed bonds. Occasionally, paleontologists find small clusters. Perhaps a family group, perhaps juveniles banded together for safety. Yet the rule remained. Triceratops was a solitary monarch. Its presence dominated the landscape so profoundly that in some fossil formations, up to 40% of all discovered skeletons belong to this one genus. Imagine walking through Hell Creek 67 million years ago. The rivers teeming with turtles and crocodiles, the skies filled with flying reptiles. And in the distance, more often than not, a solitary Triceratops grazing beneath the sun. There is a quiet majesty to this image, not a roaring predator or a frenzied stampede, but a lone sentinel of the Cretaceous. Horns rising above the foliage like banners of survival. And yet, even in these tranquil scenes, danger was never far. For in the same forests, in the same river valleys, another shadow waited. The Tyrannosaurus, the eternal rival, ever ready to test the strength of the silent giant. For millions of years the balance held. Triceratops roamed the land, Tyrannosaurus stalked the shadows, and the forests of North America thrived under their rule. But no strength, no armor, no dominance can defy the heavens. 66 million years ago, a fireball tore through Earth's atmosphere. In an instant, the age of giants was undone. The asteroid's impact unleashed a chain of devastation. Shockwaves flattening forests, tsunamis roaring across inland seas, wildfires consuming the continent. The sky darkened with ash, choking the world in an endless night. Plants withered, ecosystems collapsed. The reign of the dinosaurs ended not with a whimper, but with a cataclysm. And yet, in the fossil record, the Triceratops still lingers at the very edge of extinction. In the rocks of the Hell Creek Formation, paleontologists uncovered a skeleton lying just above the boundary that marks the catastrophe, only 13 centimeters above the line that separates two eras. This single fossil may represent one of the very last dinosaurs to ever walk the earth. A lone Triceratops grazing in the twilight of its world, unaware that the end had already begun. It is a haunting image, the armored titan, survivor of countless battles, finally undone not by predator's tooth or rival's horn, but by the sky itself. A warrior stripped of its battlefield, a giant outlasted by catastrophe. But death is not the end of legend. In museums, in books, in the dreams of children and the art of scientists, the Triceratops still lives, not as prey, not as victim, but as the rival of kings, the horned warrior that faced down the tyrant Rex and carved its scars into history. Perhaps that is why its story endures with such force. The Triceratops reminds us that even in the shadow of extinction, courage and power leave a mark that time cannot erase. Its horns, its frill, its massive frame. They are not just bones and stone, they are the echoes of defiance, the memory of a creature that stood unbroken until the very end. And so, when we look at its skull today, we are not staring into the past. We are staring into the eyes of a warrior whose legend will never die.